Welcome, everybody, and it's me, Supreme Decisions, and you're tuned into another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute podcast. Now, I told you guys I was going to try to put out 25. Well, actually, I did not say try. I told you guys I'm going to put out 25 additional podcasts prior to the end of the year, so which meant I'm probably going to be doing at least one a day until that time. And this is technically episode 2. And if you're looking it up, it's probably going to be season 3. Now, let's get to business. During the last podcast, the Supreme Direction, in the context of giving you an idea of the vision of where we are heading as a group, as a collective, and understanding the importance of the foundation. I spoke about one of the things of a detailed discovery. Now, before you get your popcorn, before you sit down and get your yak, before you actually get into anything, I'm going to give you a little insight. Today's episode is not going to be that long. We're probably looking at about 25, maybe 30 minutes max. So it's not something for you to get entirely comfortable with. But it's the beginning part of a continuation from part 1, which was understanding the foundation of any case, civil or criminal, when you're doing your own self-representation, when you're defending yourself, when you are truly understanding and standing on your civil liberties, your rights. Now, one of the things that I've come across that a lot of people actually have grown a little upset by or not fully understood was the context of the discovery and understanding of Brady and things that you can and cannot ask for. And even the context, which a friend of mine that I was helping just a minute ago, literally, ran into it where he was using a public pretender. And this piranha, at this point, asked him, when I told him to submit the discovery, the detailed discovery, because again, in Georgia, which is codified pretty much in any of your organic codes, any right that is not exercised in writing, it is implied as waived. So anything that you are not asking for, if it is not asked for initially and not looking to be enforced, you can no longer bring it up later. Now, when he took this detailed discovery to his attorney, she told him, well, you can't ask for officer information because the judge is just going to take the officer's word as truth, and you cannot go against it. Now, when he confronted her about it, because again, that's not what Brady states, that's not what Giglio states. Now I'm going to get into that because again, it's something that requires a more in-depth conversation. It's also something that I'm going to have a couple videos on. But this portion of it is something I've spoken about, and it's putting police character on trial, and that is a podcast I did during 2020. The reason why we do that is because I use this as a weapon for, pretty much. Because I tell you, the one thing that you have the right to do, the obligation to do for yourself is to challenge everything. The one thing my grandmother always told me that I didn't believe shit stank until I smelled it. I don't just take anybody's word for it. And what was amazing in this situation was the fact that because the detailed discovery had not only organic code from Georgia on it, but it also had Supreme Court cases on it. Her response was to send him state cases which was funny to me because they were appellate cases where the judge stated that because the officer's word were not challenged in the initial trial, they could not be challenged at appeal, which again goes along with the Georgia Organic Code. When you do not challenge it prior to, you cannot challenge it later. So whenever it was confronted, because again, remember the context of the original request. He was challenging the officer's statement prior to. So that made the appeal itself void, because those were appeals where it was not initially challenged. When you're doing things and the ideals of being innocent until proven guilty is a lost art, because that was never an intent for anyone that was not white, Caucasian, European, however you want to do it, because that the original setup of the system was not for anyone that was not of color. Regardless of how you feel about that statement, the original setup of this policing system, the judicial system, was not for someone that was not of color. So when we're going into these things, the context is those that are of color are vilified first. They're monsters first. They're weaponized first. Then they have to prove their innocence, because they have to explain to everyone why they didn't do something. What I do is take that from the system itself. You're innocent, and they have to prove everything they're saying. If not, there's a consequence behind it. Now, I'm going to get deeper into that, because when you're looking at it on its surface, it's not a common practice anyone challenges what a police officer says, right? And those that do, again, it goes into that 5% that I spoke about in the last episode. Because 95% of us just roll over and accept whatever somebody tells us, and we just keep pushing. But that 5% that goes out and fights and that wins, they challenge that. They say, okay, cool, you said it. Now prove it. Now, time and time again, we've gone through these things where we watched in Virginia, where a young man actually framed 400 people. And each of the cases he was involved in was overturned. Whether he works again or not, even though he's in jail, quote unquote, he's on what's called a Brady List. So if he's ever a police officer again and he's called to testify for whatever reason, the prosecution becomes malicious because they are putting a known liar on the stand. I can go into others because that's also one in the context of the future of this podcast, the future of the Supreme Decisions brand, the future of the YouTube channels, the future of the videos. We're going to have a series called, and it's going to be a long series, and it's going to be going on forever, called the Brady List. Because even when we talk about Tamir Rice, the officer that gunned him down in a drive-by was going to get another job until, now note that, until I actually spoke about it, and Undisputable spoke about it. He then had the job rescinded from him. Why? Because he is worthless to the prosecution. Why? Because of the Brady List. Now, understanding this, when you're challenging the officer's statement, you're taking his hearsay and forcing him to prove, or her, prove the things that they are saying. Now, why is that important? Oftentimes you guys hear me talk about G.I. Joe. The knowing is half the battle. Well, what do we know? Jordan V. Prince states that Police departments don't hire anyone with the IQ higher than 107. So that means they're on the low end of the intelligence spectrum. What do we know? I've actually given you multiple case law as well as shown you multiple videos where the police are given stock language. I'm going to say that one more time. Low intelligence, they're giving language to actually describe a situation, which is why you can't differentiate one from another, because they are unable to articulate the things that go on. So when you're unable to actually articulate what's going on, you're unable to actually think in a in-depth manner. There's another case that states that a police officer, unless given consent by you or a judge, does not have the wherewithal to determine what probable cause is. I'm going to say that one more time because, again, I say these things. I've given you Supreme Court cases. I'm giving you the what you know. They are not intelligent enough. Without permission from you, whoops, that means you have more power than them. Or consent from a judge because they are unable to determine what probable cause is. Yet they'll tell you, I have probable cause. They don't know what probable cause is because even in that, they have to be specific in the thing that they're searching for, in the violation itself that offers them the crime to look. But in order for them to have the violation, they have to be able to articulate. They can't articulate, so they have to use a language that allows them to do that. But then they have to prove everything that they just said, and we know that because they're not taught to do it properly. The challenging of it is the essence of getting it to be done right. Because now we stop a lot of the extra when we start to fight back. Because how you stop a bully from bullying you, you punch him in the mouth. That's how you stop the bullying. Because they'd rather go to the other 95 that they can punch in the mouth that doesn't hit back. The whole point in the list is to ensure a fair trial. The whole point in questioning the officer's statement is to ensure that there was actually a crime committed. The whole point of the challenging of the officer's statement is to make sure that there was probable cause for an arrest. Because this way, we actually have proper policing as well as safer streets, which is supposed to be what we're taught is the duty and the goal of policing. Now, a Giglio or Brady List is a list compiled usually by a prosecuting office or a police department containing the names and details of law enforcement officers who had sustained incidents of untruthfulness. Yes, I had to let that sink in because we often hear about these things where like the Breonna Taylor incident, they lied in the report, but there was video. Then we go into even George Floyd. They lied in the report and there was video. Then we talk about my favorite target, the Phoenix Police Department, the most violent on the planet. They lied in the report, but then the video pops up. We talk about even these officers that were doing the planting in Atlanta, lying in the reports. That would qualify as putting a liar on the stand. Bouts of untruthfulness. Had criminal convictions, which a lot of times they are covered up. Have candor issues. Now, a candor issue itself is something where most of the time it's inappropriate conversations, because remember, these guys are servants. These guys and gals are voluntary servants. So just like I spoke about 5 years ago in Terryville, Ohio, it states an officer giving commands or instructions without a crime is a show of authority stop. And if you don't believe me, please look it up. We've got Google. There are tons of law libraries. There are tons of lawyer offices that can actually have these questions answered for you. A show of authority stop is illegal. So when you're talking about somewhere where they're talking about lacks of candor, you're talking about inappropriate language. Now, we heard that technically in the Ahmaud Arbery situation, because it wasn't elevated to a hate crime until they started searching police records, because he had several acts of candor or candor issues or some other type of issue placing their credibility into question. This would consist of police misconduct, public complaints, use of force reports. Now, why is that important? Because we talked about the J. Cole incident. He was asked directly, do you believe there are good police officers? Even did the podcast about Officer Dingle. Why? Why does no one smile when they see me? The context is when I did the Minnesota Police Department bad officers, 308 officers retired. 296 of them had police misconduct issues, public complaints, use of force issues. When we talk about the George Floyd, 3 of the 4 officers involved had 4 or more federal complaints or federal lawsuits against them at the time of this, at the time of the murdering of George Floyd. We talked about Arizona. 60% of their police department has either police misconduct issues, which are department issues, and also had multiple public complaints. We often hear about these officers that do these quote unquote wrong deeds, these bad apples, these bad seeds, or however you want to put it, the few. All of them have had multiple police misconduct issues. All of them had multiple public complaints that were ignored. That's why I spoke about the police union. They are the problem because they are the gate holders, the gatekeepers. They're spending money not on police health, not on police education, but keeping bad officers on the street. And when you're talking about we're supposed to respect the badge, we're supposed to respect the uniform, the people that are placing themselves in that uniform aren't putting themselves in a mechanism that allows for respect, because the mechanism itself doesn't respect the police union, does not respect the police officer, and does not respect the policing duties. Because I'm going to get back on track in just a second. And the reason I say this is because if you really respected good policing, you would not put a murdering liar that has had multiple department violations on the street with good cops. If you cared about the policing duties, you understand we are energy mechanisms. Say, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred, and that only comes from the outside. Police officers are going into a negative situation 98% of their day, every day, day in, day out. Yet, you only spend $7 million a year on police mental health. And they have the highest rate of suicide in any profession in this country. Because you constantly talk about, if you don't have an outlet, something bad gonna happen. Yet we talk about them not having an outlet or the availability of an outlet, and then them exploding on the public. If you cared about the policing duties, you would make sure that they had a place to release that energy prior to going home and having the highest domestic battery rates across the country. If you cared about them, you would do something about their mental health issue, making sure that energy gets off of them every day or at least once a week so they can actually release it. But when I talk about it, I'm the bad guy. But here's the thing. Again, knowing is half the battle. I know they're not doing this. I know they're sending them out as trained attack dogs. That's why none of the ones that follow me ever correct me when I say it. And as you know, I just pause for dramatic effect because I want you to let that sink in. Because a bad cop is a good cop's worst nightmare, because they are putting the good cops in danger. But again, the system itself is designed for the bad to flourish. Just as Jerry Williams. She is a police chief that just lost. She stated in the most violent police department in the country that was killing someone every 5 days on average. It was the citizens' fault that they were getting shot. This same woman lied on 3 of her own deputies who are now suing her in federal court. This same woman had over 120 people arrested, put them in a fake gang, said that they were violent in testimony. But we're supposed to respect that. And they allowed her to keep being a police officer because of the policing union. But I'm the bad guy for making sure that you have a defense against a Jerry Williams. Because here's the biggest part. When you're requesting, they call it the Brady List, or if you're talking with me and I'm helping you with your discovery, it's going to be Giglio information. In California, I forgot what it's called, but you actually have a different name for it. And I actually did a video on that probably 3 years ago on UTEP. But I talked about how they're trying to get rid of it. But that's the whole purpose of me doing the Brady List now. So it's not something they can get rid of. And if you want to stop it on YouTube, cool, because it's 44 other platforms it's going to be circulating on. I'm not just circulating it on one. I'm not just circulating it in the US. I'm not just circulating it to the point to where it's just conversation. I'm doing something to make sure not only those that are sitting here watching it or listening to it right now can actually benefit from it, but those down the line understand the prosecution is now doing something malicious. This is your get out of jail free card. Because what happens is everything that officer touched becomes poison. The more someone fights back, the more people fight back. They have to correct that system. I'm going to say that again. The more people that actually fight back and fight back the right way, they have to begin to correct the system. The problem is, many of us are accepting the bullying. Many of us are giving up for fear, for lack of knowledge. for convenience. Well, shit, I gonna pay this little $100 because, I got to go to work tomorrow. But then you don't understand until you have to go do something else. Now you have a record and they're holding that against you. Can you fight that as well? Absolutely. But again, it still is one fight, one battle. You're not even dealing with the source. Many of us don't even understand that context. We're dealing with a symptom and not the actual cause. Now, the prosecutor is required to turn over character information. Say that one more time. The prosecutor is required to turn over character information. Why? Because you have the right to confront your accuser. If you're stopped at a stoplight, if you're stopped on the road and a traffic citation, the officer writes a police report. The reason I tell you to go get the police report is because you now get to challenge that officer. Or when they say something stupid, well, I saw you run the red light. Well, cool. You now get to challenge that officer's statement. Oh, well, I'm not going to tick you for the red light I originally stopped you for. I'm going to give you a ticket for something else. Do you mind if I search your car? Instead of answering certain things, one of the things, I'm actually going off track a little bit, but I'm going to come back. One of the things that actually used to piss me off was one of the things I actually initially started teaching my kids. And it's, I do not consent. Because no matter what the question is, I do not consent. I do not consent. I don't consent to search. I don't consent. I don't consent. Well, can we talk? I don't consent. I don't consent. And the more you say that, the more the violations happen. The problem is now they have to come up with this thing called exigent circumstances. Because I'm gonna give you an instance. It was funny as shit. So, young man gets stopped. And the cop says, do you mind if I search you? And I say, I do not consent. He grabs my arm. He opens my car door. He pulls me 10 feet away. Sits me on the hood of his cruiser. And he goes into my car. And he goes, you kind of giddy. What you smiling for? I said, because you're too stupid to even understand what exigent circumstances are. He goes, what do you mean? I said, my car door wasn't open. I said, and it's on the video of your car that I'm sitting on, which I'm going to subpoena. I'm going to request in discovery that I'm more than 8 feet from the car, so there's no chance of me destroying evidence. And if you pull me over for speeding, there's nothing you can search my car for that would actually show you that I was speeding. He leans out the car and he begins to think. He starts to get on his phone or on the radio to call his sergeant. And I said, yes, I'm going to request the dispatch records. I said, and I hope this doesn't exceed 20 minutes. So he was like, oh, you're one of them. I was like, okay, well, what is that? Intelligent, understand what your duties are better than you do? I said, well, he said, because I can keep you for 45 minutes. I said, absolutely, you can. I said, but that doesn't make it lawful. He ends up letting me go. I ended up filing against him anyway. He's surprised when we're sitting in court because I'm suing him in his individual capacity. He can't use a union rep, so now he has to pay for a federal attorney out of his pocket. The culmination of this story was he actually stopped being a police officer when he started understanding that he had no power, he had no control, and when the actual fight came to him, he saw he was by himself. The whole point in the things that I do when I talk about weaponizing your defense, I'm not talking about doing something malicious. I'm talking about literally evening the playing field. I'm giving you back the power you never lost. I'm actually telling you what's written in their books. You know, the one they get you to study, but they don't look at themselves. I'm actually redirecting you back to their very words because you can't argue with yourself. I'm directing you back to their state constitution, their organic code, their laws and statutes, and their duties. Their oath, their fiduciary duties. I can ramble about this crap all day long, but it's easier as I give it to you, again, spoon feeding you a little bit at a time, a little bit as we go, and you start to see it yourself because they become more than just words. They become more than just ideas. They become more than this dude talking. This becomes more than a podcast then. Because the point in this entire thing is something that most police officers don't do properly, which is you're putting together your totality of circumstances. You're gathering and getting disclosure of all information about any and every individual upon whom the testimony will be relied on from or by the prosecutor. You're getting all that information. You're weaponizing your defense. You're making sure that you can prepare properly to make sure if you did it, they're going to have to prove it. Because even with my brother, me and my brother, it was one of the things that most hilarious things I've ever heard. My brother, we've been taught. It's been etched in our souls. I don't care if you have video of us doing it. You got to get 12 people plus Jesus to say we did it. Because I'm not going to give it to you. And even the young lady, I'm exposing you. She pulls up and she found the one case I told you guys. Yeah, I went ahead and paid it. I said it was $12. It ended up being 15. My bad for the $3. But understand, I spent 20 to go down there to this hick ass town in Georgia. So it becomes one of those issues. Am I sitting up here going to waddle in this other BS? No, don't have to. But I want to make sure you understand how it's going and why you're doing it, because it's your right to. It's your duty to. Because those that can fight should fight. Now, I actually watched this little series on, I believe it was Netflix, and my silly ass did not turn off my phone. And thank you, Diggs. It was a series called We Own the City. It was about a corrupt Baltimore police unit. Say that one more time. It was about a corrupt Baltimore police unit. From top to bottom, it was corrupt. Now, they created a crime. Sound familiar? What about Philando Castile? He said, yes, I have my gun license. That's what he told Geronimo. Geronimo immediately became afraid of a man that is legally carrying with his wife and child in the car. Geronimo said, don't move, don't move. Geronimo fired and killed him. Geronimo's partner asked him, why did you shoot? Geronimo created a crime for Philando Castile on the emphasis of fearing for his life simply because he said he had a gun license. This Baltimore unit created crimes and arrested people for them. One sergeant told him when he was doing paperwork, his sergeant, always play up the attack. Now, I'm going to give you a little context. They were doing what we now know as enforcing a curfew in Baltimore. Not sure if you've ever seen that happen prior to 2020, but it's not pretty. These guys were sitting on their porch. I'm going to say that one more time. They were on the porch. They were grown adults on the porch. The cop said, "Hey, go in the house, man. It's after 9 o'clock. And they like, "Dude, are you serious? We're adults. We're here, sitting in the doorway." Cop said, "Just go in the house." Well, okay, we're still adults sitting on the porch. So the officer then tells the guy, he jumps out the car after turning around. He drove down the street and turned around, came back. He jumps out the car, walks up onto the porch to tell the guy, "Get in the house," and he pushed this grown man into the house. And the man turns around, just like, again, the machismo stuff. Said, "Dude, if you didn't have a badge on," because, again, there was no purpose for that, because, Officer Dingle said that they're taught to be professional. Not sure where the professionalism was in that. However, he tells him, "If you didn't have the badge on, I'll beat your ass." The guy takes the badge off, and his partner commenced to beating up a second guy with his baton. And while this officer was getting tossed around, he ends up tasing the guy that was sitting on their porch that originally started the altercation. Now, when the police report was written, it was not written properly or to the satisfaction that covered the cop's ass. Why? Because the stock language that he used was not proper in the eyes of his sergeant. So he told him, "Hey, play up the attack," because he had to find out what was going on through the partner's police report. That's why I say get a scene report, because you need a report of every officer on scene. Because everyone there has paperwork to do. Each one of those officers has to give an account of what they saw and what they participated in. Each one of those officers' character is now on the line. But I'm going to get back to that. Emphasize the threat to your life and others. Now, the reason why that's important is because I want you to get again, these are just contextual understandings. This is from a movie. This was about an actual police department and police officers that were arrested. It was 9 of them, and actions that were done and said to them throughout their criminal enterprise. I had a conversation when a young man in Alabama, or Mississippi, he drove his truck that he was working on down the street to go get some burgers for him and his nephew. He's pulled over by a police officer that knows him. She's talking to him. He's cordial. And she goes, "Hey, if you don't have any warrants, what's your information?" He gave it to her. They're smiling. She says, "Hey, relax. Go on and eat. If you don't have any warrants, I'm going to just follow you to your house." Because, again, he's technically driving with no tag on the truck. She runs him. He doesn't have any warrants. However, while she's in her car, a second car pulls up. Now, while she's walking back to the car, the second officer begins to escalate, that professionalism that Officer Dingle likes to talk about. He begins to escalate the situation and starts threatening the driver. The driver then drives off. He shoots into the car. He jumps onto the car, shoots into the car, and kills the driver. He then, while the car is still rolling, snatches the passenger out onto the ground. He has several injuries. Now, People stated that, oh, well, he's allowed to shoot that guy because he was fleeing from a crime scene. And I stated, actually, Tennessee v. Gardner says he has to be using something other than the vehicle as a weapon. And, because the biggest words in law, if and or. And posing a threat to others' safety. Him driving off is not grounds for deadly force. The officer jumping onto the truck is not officer safety. The officer placed himself into a dangerous situation. He is not then allowed to dictate or state, I was in fear for my life when I jumped onto his truck like I'm doing some MacGyver type stuff. The confusion is we moralize murder because we needed that guy that was killed to be a bad guy. The problem was he wasn't. So the media stopped talking about it. And people went on to the next one to complain about, instead of actually addressing the issue of what this lying cop did. Because again, he got caught lying in his police report. He's still working. He's still working. But we're going to get into that. But I want you to understand those things are actionable when it comes to going to court, because that officer's character now is in question. This is why you request the Giglio or Brady List from a prosecutor, because the prosecutor is obligated to turn it over, because you have the right to confront your accusers, and they must prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. These are some of the things that you do to stand on just that. Pay attention to the things that I like to call the rewritten police reports, because again, they can change names, they can change dates. They cannot change those file stamps. Whoops, did I just open some eyes? They cannot change the file stamps. And what I mean by that is, had a young lady that I was helping. Let's call her Toya for this instance. Toya, beautiful young lady, she went out and she was working. She gets off work, and where she worked at, I believe it was a bar. Anywhere, wherever it was, they were serving alcohol. And that was her employment. So she gets off work, she's driving. Officer gets behind her, which because I told her when she made the stop and she originally seen him, hey, go request the video from that timestamp, see if they'll give it to you. You're pretty enough, they'll probably give it to you. It's cool. And understand, ladies, gentlemen, if you look good, use that as a weapon to get the things that you need. There's nothing wrong with that. Us ugly people got to do other things, but if you're pretty, use it. So she got the video from CVS because she did make a stop. During that stop, the officer asked for her number. She ignored him and drove off. Now, when she left, she was going to pick up a friend. Right before she gets to the friend, the officer stops her and arrests her because he asked again for her phone number after pulling her over. Wasn't no real pretext to the stop. Just asking for her phone number, was using a little police power to get it. Cool. What the officer didn't realize was he was close enough to her friend where her friend had recorded it on her iPhone. Now, here's why I tell people, never, ever fill out an affidavit. I told her to go get the police report. She went and got the police report. She drops off her affidavit. Now, the original police report, he gives some BS bogusness. Oh, she was swerving from side to side. Again, if you look up case law, where actually I did a DUI video, swerving from side to side, even for more than a mile, is not grounds to stop someone for a DUI check. 2, she refused the breathalyzer. 3, the arrest in Georgia was automatic, quote unquote, because it's an officer's discretion. I'll let that go again because equal protection actually threw into that one because that same officer had let an officer that was pulled over on video for DUI prior go free. He didn't do that with her. It became an equal protection violation, but I'll get into that as well. But when she dropped off her affidavit, she mentioned the video she had from her friend. She requested her discovery. When she gets discovery, there's a second police report that is completely different from the first. This one is, as they said, tighten up your work. You got to play up everything, and you got to talk about your safety. He now speaks about, he noted that he arrested her because he had to take control of the scene because she was hiding videotaping him. Problem was, he forgot that he had already given out the original police report. And he had also forgot that him asking for her number, which he was loud doing, had nothing to do with what was on her arrest report. These are the things which we use because now her case gets thrown out because he is a liar. Now, but the problem is we did not enforce it or do anything to the point to where everyone he stopped now is pretty much, will be a wash because we put him on a Brady list because the prosecutor's not going to do it voluntarily. They're just on to the next. But understand, you have to make sure you never show your hand too early. And you always pay attention to the timestamps on every document that you get, every piece of evidence that comes back, and understand how and when to use it. Now, I'm actually getting ready to start wrapping it up a little bit because I'm going to give you a couple examples of the main reason why we're doing this. Because I'm not sure if you guys remember, I talked about my buddy and he's a police officer, and the one thing he's talking about, I said, well, why did you do it? He said, because we're being punished for doing what we're trained to do. I gave you the young man in Virginia with 400 cases where he planted evidence on innocent people. I gave you 124 people from Jerry Williams who planted evidence and made up testimony against innocent people. Chicago Police Sergeant Ronald Watts framed 200 plus people. The DA was forced to vacate the conviction of only 83 of the people that fought back. He framed more than 200 people, but only 82 of those people, for less than half of those people that knew they could get free, fought back. Let that sink in. A corrupt Baltimore task force involving thousands of cases that range from robbery, extortion, faking evidence, planting drugs on drivers, was put together to stop guns and violence, and during the internal affairs report, use indictment to find other officers involved, which again talked about the same report, because again, all of these things are interconnected, because even with that task force, it went all the way to the top. They had to find a way to go beyond the people that was there. That's why you call me, because I know how to go around these people that are there in place, in power, because everyone has someone they have to answer to. And by the way, I apologize. The Fairfax Police Department police officer that framed over 400 people was Jonathan A. Freitag. Now, the New Albany police officer, Adam Schneider, planted drugs on innocent people. Officer Zachary Wester planted drugs on drivers. Kyle Erickson and Emmer Pastrin played the don't believe what you are looking at, defense, when they were caught by their own body cameras planting drugs on drivers. Now I'm gonna give you some. I'm gonna give you a little context to this. Do you know what the most dangerous part of policing is? I'll give you a hint. It's traffic stops. Now, when you look at the young lady who had 2 kids and was pregnant in her car, she was being pulled over on the highway. She then called into 911 and drove all the way to a gas station where it was well lit and in public view. The officer then drug her out of the car, blah, 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 blah. Now, he's now not working as a police officer. But now do you understand the context? Give you a little weight, because I just named 6 drivers, 6 police officers that were framing drivers. I named an entire task force that was framing drivers. I talked about a police chief that was framing innocent people. Do I need to do it? Because again, I'm pretty sure there's a couple of police apologists that are actually listening now. When they say, well, if you're not committing a crime. Oh, you already know what it is. Because I think you just need to keep quiet. Because when you're talking about something and we're looking at the totality of circumstances, we're gathering information to make an intelligent decision on it. By just taking one side is the one thing that you don't want, because these unintelligent people can't make a decision unless someone else gives it to them. Why would I take their side when even the FBI says they're wrong 3 times out of 4? Why would I take the side immediately of someone that is wrong 75% of the time? And that's if they're a good officer. Absolutely pause for dramatic effect, because I want you to understand, because when you're saying, well, if you're not committing crimes, I think you need to keep quiet, because we're talking about no crimes with Jerry Williams. No crimes for the Baltimore Task Force with 9 cops. No crime with Chicago's Police Sergeant Ronald Watson for 200 people. No crime for Fairfax Police Department Officer Jonathan Freitag. No crimes for, Zachary Wester. No crimes for Adam Snyder. I think you need to keep quiet. But again, these are people that are offering a baseline for the reason we need the Brady List. We need it out of the hands of the corrupt. We need it out of the hands of those that don't want to give it to you. We need it out of the hands of those that don't want to lose. We need it out of the hands of those that actually don't care about justice. Because I'm gonna give you something before I continue this. I know I said I was getting ready to close it up, and it's happening. It's just not happening just yet. Because the most crooked of them, Jerry Williams, she was asked directly about the Brady List. She asked why she wasn't on it. She was asked why she wasn't on it. And the funniest thing was, this woman said on a live interview with a reporter that she didn't even know what the Brady List was. She had no clue what the Brady List was. Yet, one of the places that your Brady List is to come from is from the actual police department. Then she said something, because I spoke about this in the last podcast. You should be able to come off the Brady List once you've been good for a while. Yet, when someone has a felony, when someone gets arrested, it don't just fall off because they've been good for a while. These people have no clue what it is, that the job that they do, because they're not trained to do it properly. Whenever I train you or give you the opportunity to do it and defend yourself, I'm looked at as a bad guy. It's amazing to me that people would rather live blind, rather live in servitude than to actually have independence. It amazes me. I'd rather be told what to do. I'd rather be lied to than have the truth sitting on my lap. But when I talk about Officer Jeffrey Mello shot Richard Gibbs because his partner yelled gun, then admitted to not seeing a gun, and then planted a gun on him. Yeah, I'm gonna give you that one more time. Officer Jerry Mello shot Richard Gibbs because his partner yelled gun. Remember that stock language we talked about? Gun, gun, gun. Remember the 13-year-old that was videotaping the police in New Orleans, and the partner yelled, gun, gun, gun. And the 13-year-old yells, how do you see a gun? And then they yell, it's a camera, yet they still proceeded to do an aggravated assault by pointing their guns at this 13-year-old. We'll get into that because the media took that off. They stopped talking about it. I'm going to talk about it because I'm going to get the names of those officers because it's amazing to me. Because again, they're good people. We should respect the badge when the badge don't even respect it. People in uniform don't even respect it. Those that are protecting us have no context of how to do it. Absolutely pause for dramatic effect because I want you to understand that that was a thinking moment. That was one to bring you back here. Because when I told you I'm wrapping it up. But I want to make sure you're here with me when I'm doing it. Now, Richard Gibbs shot by Jeffrey Mello because his partner yelled gun. Then he admitted, I ain't see no gun. Then Jeffrey Mello, the police officer, planted a gun on Richard Gibbs. He was worrying about his safety from a non-existent gun that he used. Isn't that amazing? The most dangerous place for a black man to be is in the mind of a white man. When D.L. Hughley wrote that book, people thought he was crazy. When they made the movie The Hate U Give, people shunned that movie. And if you haven't seen it and you are a poor person, if you are a person with dark skin, you have lost your mind. Because again, that movie, one of the things I hated about it was every situation in that movie I've been in at one time or another. And most of it happened during a 10-year period. Because one of the things, I even watched D.L. Hughley on occasion because he talks about things that I actually am interested in. But one of the things he talked about was how we're impressing suppression onto our children. Because police officers are now going into elementary schools and arresting 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. They're no longer calling the parents. It's okay to treat a 8-year-old like a criminal. But yet we look at someone with stature. Because I'm gonna give you another one. Dave Chappelle talked about the young lady, I'm not going to say her name, that was kidnapped at the age of 14. 9 blocks from her house. That's where they kept her. 9 blocks from her house. Everybody made a spectacle about it. Same time period. An autistic boy, same age, 14, was charged as an adult for performing a wrestling move that he saw on TV. How old is 14? Is 14 enough for someone to make an adult decision, or is 14 too young to actually make an adult decision? I'll let those that need to catch up, but understand the question. Because when you don't have dark skin, 14 is plenty old to go to prison for the rest of your life. But when you're fair skinned, 14 is too old or too young to be held accountable for any action that you participate in. Notice the words are used. Detective Camilla Antoni. Police brutality, stole cash and searches on video and remained on the street. Remember, I talked about a young lady that was promoted after Christopher Donner reported that not only did she kick a handcuffed man with dementia, but she kicked him in the head and in the chest. She was promoted. Christopher Donner was suspended. Christopher Donner became a monster. He was everything but a good police officer at that time. He was then doing police tactics, and police was worried that this monster would employ the tactics on them that they had employed on others. Detective Camilo Antonio performed police brutality, stole money, and unwarranted illegal searches, all on video. Did I mention that the young lady that Christopher Donner reported committed this act against a disabled man with dementia while handcuffed, was caught on video, but Christopher Donner was the monster for reporting it? Don't worry about it, because I'm gonna let you understand, let it marinate with you, because at some point you can go back and listen to Frankenstein's monster. Because you have to understand context. That's what I give you. But again, at the same time, Detective Camilo Antonio will be on the Brady list, because Detective Camilo Antonio committed police brutality, stole cash, and performed illegal searches on video. We're going to make any arrest that this officer makes worthless. We're going to make any testimony that this officer gives worthless. We're going to make him a liability for those that employ him. New York Sergeant Raina Madha and Officer Tina Alexander are on video planting drugs on a man prior to arresting him for possession. Planting drugs on a man prior to arresting him for possession, but we should trust them. It's only a few. LAPD officer Giglio planted drugs in the wallet of Ronald Shields, caught by his body camera because he turned it off. Looking like because of the 30-second buffer period. He thought he had turned it off in time, but he forgot there's a 30-second buffer. 30 seconds before the audio kicks in, and 30 seconds once you hit the off button that it actually goes off. He forgot about that, but he planted it in this young man's wallet, Ronald Shields. Notice I'm using names. The whole point in this is to make sure when we're talking about these acts that the Brady List, the Giglio List, the requests that you're going to be making to challenge the officer's statements are something that can be sustainable, because these instances not only are public record, but even if they destroy the public record, you now have context, because I'm going to put up dates, I'm going to put up file numbers, I'm going to put up any information I file, even if I have to do update videos. Because again, the point of this, just like the point of starting this channel, was to make sure you can weaponize your defense, that you had an ability to defend yourself, that you understood the context of law. You can navigate through the complexities without fear. These are the things that I want to make sure stay intact. Officer Omar Abdullah was caught planting fake drugs on people. Say that one more time. Officer Omar Abdullah was caught planting fake drugs on people. He wasn't even putting real drugs on you. He was fake drugging you up and then arresting you for it. This officer is a liar. This officer is a bad officer. This officer does not deserve to be wearing the uniform. This officer should be a liability. This officer will be made an example of because we're putting him on the Brady List. Because these are the officers that you're going to be confronting. These are going to be the liabilities of the prosecutions against you. They're out here in the open, but they operate in secrecy. As the Constitution of Georgia states, the Constitution of Georgia states, the government derives. Good God, what is going on with me right now? As the Constitution of Georgia states, the government derives directly from the people. We give them the power, but not questioning, not requiring, and not firing back allows them. Say that one more time. Not questioning, not requiring, and not fighting back allows them to treat you as less than. Because that's why when we talked about the Tommy Sotomayor question, they've got that triangle upside down. You are the top of the totem pole. You are the head honcho. You are the most powerful person in there. Everyone there works for you. You are the employer. Everyone below you are employees. But if you allow them, if you don't put things in writing, you are the one that's convicting yourself. If you're allowing them to say something about you and you never challenge it, or if you don't do it properly, you can never hold them accountable, nor can you ever complain about it again.